Hi, everybody. Welcome to A Little Help on Central Idea for the story 11. So you should be able to see on your screen now a little slideshow that'll take us through till we get to an answer. So just some reminders that central idea is the general idea or the belief that's kind of shown by a whole text, that's shown by a whole story. It's the message that the author is trying to communicate. And the central idea always has two parts. It has a topic and the author's opinion of the topic. So what's the central idea of 11? So the only place to find the answer to that is in the text. So we talked about this when we read the story, but to remind you, or to cover it if you missed it, here's a couple of paragraphs from the text. They're actually not quite next to each other, which is why those three little dots are between the two paragraphs, but they're on the same page. Our narrator, she's had a hard day. And at one point she says, as you can see here highlighted, I'm 11 and it's my birthday today and I'm crying like I'm 3 in front of everybody. So even though she's like all grown up, she's 11, she's having a hard time acting like 11. She's acting like she's 3. And down below we get another piece of evidence which just kind of adds to the idea. She's 11, but she's also 10 and she's 9 and she's 8 and she's 7 and she's all those ages all in one. So even though she's 11, it doesn't mean that that little piece of her that's 3 isn't still there inside of her somewhere. So we start to get towards this idea of like, what is she trying to tell us by this story? It's her birthday, right? The fact that it's her birthday should tell us, okay, this has something to do with it's your birthday, you're getting older, you're supposed to be more grown up. We should start having that idea that that's what this is about sort of growing up and acting your age. But it's hard to act your age. So now we have some sense of, from the text, of what the central idea of the story is. So remember that what we do is we put together a topic and author's opinion of the topic. So our topic seems like it has something to do with acting your age, like acting like you're the age you're supposed to be, acting grown up. But we can tell from the story she's crying in front of her whole class. That's a hard thing to do. So that gives us the central idea. That's it. That's the central idea of this story of 11. So, and we can turn that around and turn the question around and say it. So let's take a look at our response itself. So how do we start the response? Well, we start the response with the TTQA, right? So we take the question, which is, what is the central idea of 11? And we turn it around to the central idea of 11 is that. And then I'm just going to take that information, the topic and the author's opinion of the topic, kind of mix them together, mash them up together, and finish the sentence with that central idea. And that is the beginning of my response to this final question on your SWIC. So, but it's not the end of our response. So now we have to prove it. So how do you prove it? Well, we do that with evidence from the text. You're going to hear this from me all the time this year. It's always about the text. In some ways, it doesn't matter what's happened to you or what happened to some friend of yours. It's not about that. We're not writing about you and we're not writing about your friend. We're writing about this story. So if we're going to write about this story, any evidence we can find, again, isn't from your life. It's not from my life. It's not from my friend's life. It's in the text because that's the only thing we're writing about. So we need to look at the text again. And remember, I had those 2 quotes. Now, if I was writing something longer, like a paragraph or an essay or something, I'd probably use both of these quotes. But I don't think for just this short little response, I need to use both. I'm going to use the top quote because I think it's a little stronger and a little more says what I wanted to say. So you can see here, now that I have the quote, well, what am I supposed to do with that evidence from the text? So I'm glad you asked. So we already have a start. So let's just go back to where we were with our start, the turning the question around and stating the central idea. And then we'll just do the response right there and we'll add on to it. So this was our first sentence. The central idea of 11 is that, and remember we talked about the central idea having to do with acting your age and how it's hard to act your age. You're just going to put those 2 things together and finish that sentence. Okay? Then we've named the central idea. Then you can see my next sentence is, I'm just kind of telling the reader what I'm doing. The author gives us evidence of that in the text. Now as the reader, I know, oh, now you're telling me about the evidence and how that's going to prove your point. So I'm just guiding the reader along one step at a time, right? You got to, when you kind of explaining things to someone, you got to do it step by step. And that's what I'm doing. I'm explaining why I think this is the central idea. So I'm telling my reader what I'm going to do next in my response here. And then I'm going to give my evidence from the text, because that's what I just introduced, right? Evidence of that in the text. After a hard day, the narrator thinks, I'm 11 and it's my birthday today and I'm crying like I'm 3 in front of everybody. Okay, so that's my evidence from the text, the quote from the story, exact words put in quotation marks. So notice I did something a little different before my quote, though. I introduced the evidence from the text. I introduced the quote. I told my reader of my response a little bit about what was happening. After a hard day, the narrator thinks. So it's always a good idea to introduce your evidence a little bit with kind of who says this, who's thinking this, what's happening in the story. It really shouldn't be long. Notice mine is just a few words. It's not even a complete sentence, but it just kind of introduces the evidence from the text so I know, as the reader of your response, what you're talking about and what's happening. So now I've stated my central idea in my first sentence. I guided my reader along and told them, now I'm going to give you some evidence. Then I introduced my evidence, and then I gave the evidence. And we're almost done. We only have one more thing we have to do. So I gave the evidence, but how does that prove your point? You can't just dump the evidence in there and prove your point. If you're a lawyer, let's say, in court, and you're presenting evidence, and let's say your client has been accused of theft, you can't just say, here's a toaster, and expect the judge and the jury to understand what the toaster means. You have to explain, well, what does the toaster mean? Why are you showing us a toaster? So you have to explain, why are you showing me that quote? What does it prove? So, and notice I even sort of say that. That shows that, right? So that's all I'm saying. So my evidence, I'm 11 and it's my birthday today and I'm crying like I'm 3 in front of everybody. That shows that even when you have a birthday and get older, you still can what? Now, you can change that a little bit if you want to say it a little differently. I'm fine with that. This is only one way you could answer it, but if you're stuck, you can just kind of finish that sentence. But that is it. That's our entire response. If you did this, you're getting all 4 of those points, right? You're getting all the points on this. So just fill in those 2 blanks and your response is done. But again, I'm just going to go back to this slide for a second. Notice I started by stating my central idea. I told my reader I'm going to give him some evidence. I introduced my evidence. Then I gave the evidence. And then I explained what the evidence means. We're going to do this a lot this year. You're going to get this in your head. So it's going to be so in your head that you're just going to start doing this naturally. But this is a really excellent way to answer all kinds of questions, whether it's kind of a short answer like this one or a long answer like a whole essay. So I'm done with this explanation of central idea in the story 11. If you have any questions, you should always ask because that's why we're here. So thanks for visiting the Extra Help.